joining us for the recording started. Great. Thanks for joining us for the final VECAN conference workshop. I'll definitely give it a minute for people to join, but as people are joining us on this snowy Friday, I would love if you could introduce yourself in the chat and maybe share something you're most excited to do with all the snow that we'll hopefully be getting. I know I'm very excited to be cross-country skiing this weekend, so would love to hear what you have planned. And then we can get started in just a minute or two. No one has plans. They're just going to hang out inside, maybe read a nice book. Oh, Carol says, Montpelier will be cross-country skiing. Great. I'll be there too. Sledding. Sledding is so fun. I have kind of forgot that you as an adult can also sled, and it's still really fun. So that's a good thing to think. Maybe I'll do that too. Got to find a hill, but downhill skiing, great. All the nice snow activities. Okay, I think we'll go ahead and get started and people can kind of trickle in. I will share my screen. Can everyone see that? I can't see anybody actually, but I think people can see it hopefully, otherwise I'd hear something.
We can see it.
Awesome, thanks, Geoff. Okay, well, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Becca Custer, and I'm a community engagement manager at Efficiency Vermont, and helped to organize today's workshop, and will be helping to facilitate today's conversation. And people may recognize me from my previous role with VECAN, so it's nice to be back at my third virtual conference. Sadly, never got to go to an in-person one, but that's something to look forward to. I'm really excited to be here with you all and our three fantastic panelists to discuss weatherization in the multifamily sector, and really focusing on the issue of the split incentive. For those of you who don't know what the split incentive is, it refers to the split benefit of doing upgrades to a rental unit. So meaning if a property owner invests in a building, the immediate benefit may be felt most by the tenant. With thermal upgrades, for example, like weatherization, the tenant might feel more comfortable in their home. And if they're paying for their heating, which many tenants, including myself, do, they will experience a reduction in those heating costs. And this may mean that property owners may have little reason to invest in energy efficiency or thermal upgrades because they don't see the benefits of lower utility bills themselves, or the other benefits like comfort that I talked about. And this really, hinders the progression in the market in Vermont, and really not unique to Vermont, it's across the entire nation. But in Vermont, we're really lucky to have amazing individuals and organizations working to progress thermal upgrades in the multifamily sector. And today we are lucky to have three of them on this call today. I will turn it over to our panelists shortly, but before I do that, I just want to run through our very, very brief agenda for today. We'll start with a quick video on tenant weatherization protection that Tom Proctor, one of our panelists today, presented as a pitch at the EAN Summit earlier this fall. I think it does a really good job at summarizing, what the current rental market looks like and some of the issues that tenants are facing, and importantly, one effort underway to address those issues. Then I'll turn it over to our speakers today to introduce themselves and talk a little bit about the work that they're doing. And then really the majority of this workshop today is to have a discussion and open it up for questions from you all. So that will be the majority of the session, and I will turn it over to the video, but just as a reminder, please feel free to put your questions in the chat as they come up. Okay, let's play this video.
Our first pitch is on tenant weatherization.
My name is Tom Proctor, and I'm the Housing Justice Organizer for Rights and Democracy. I'm presenting our pitch on behalf of RAD, Middlebury College, the Conservation Law Foundation, and the Central Vermont Regional Planning Commission. My work with RAD has placed me in the front row of an escalating crisis in Vermont, directly affecting a near third of state residents who rent their homes. A crisis that, if left to continue, will affect every single one of us in the near future. Our proposal will provide much-needed financial respite for thousands of working people and contribute to huge gains in weatherization across Vermont. Before we get to our proposal, I would like to lay out what the rental market currently looks like and how market conditions have changed in the last few years. Rental units make up 80,000 homes in Vermont, accounting for 29% of all permanently occupied homes, or roughly 181,000 people. In the last 30 years, the growth of available homes has plummeted, a lack of availability that has been compounded by pandemic and climate migration. In 2021, for the first time in decades, Vermont saw a net increase in new residents. In short, we do not have enough available houses, we're not creating enough new housing, and the demand is only getting higher. This has been reflected in an explosion in house prices, with a staggering 16% increase in the sale price for a single-family home in the last year, set to rise again this year by another 5.2%. The knock-on effect of this increase is a bump in property valuation, which in turn has meant higher property taxes for homeowners. A lack of housing combined with a tax increase has incentivized landlords to pass the financial burdens to their tenants. In 2019, 51% of Vermont tenants spent over 30% of their income on rent, the standard for assessing affordability. While current figures are unknown, it is unquestionable that this percentage has only gone higher in the last 3 years. It's clear that the cost of housing has put pressure on other areas of our economy. When 30% of the state spend the vast majority of their income on shelter, it leaves little room to spend on leisure, entertainment and education, and curtails spending on basic necessities like food and fuel. Vermont's housing stock is old, drafty and in desperate need of mass weatherization. The issue is exacerbated with rental stock. As landlords seldom bear the burden of paying unit utility bills, they have little incentive to spend their money to modernize their units. This leaves their tenants with the crippling choice of spending money they don't have to heat their homes or to live in inhospitable conditions. The choice for many will be the latter, and in the coming years, more will be forced to take that step as energy costs continue to rise.
In the summertime, we have no way to dehumidify our place. It is always damp, which causes us to have food loss. We put a bag of bagels in our cabinet, and within 2 days without being open, it's covered in mold.
We do not feel confident bringing any of our housing issues to our landlord. We do fear that he'll retaliate. We have very little left over at the end of each month. We have relied on things like the food shelf in the past.
Last year I was paying $700, I believe, and I just re-signed my lease for the same apartment, and they're increasing my rent to around $900 now, starting next year. I've had some issues with a landlord. My heat didn't work in the winter, and he didn't do anything until I want to say about February, and there was kind of nothing we could do about it. We don't own that place, so I think we only bring issues to our landlords when it's like severe, there's nothing else we can do. Yeah, I just don't want to upset them because they control my living situation, and if they decide they don't want me there, they can.
In my last apartment, one of my bedroom windows had a sheet of ice through the winter on the inside. The heat wasn't actually working for several weeks. It was really, really bad. I had to wear multiple pairs of sweatpants to bed. Yeah, at one point the pipes just burst because it was so freezing in my apartment.
During the months of like January to May, probably half of what I make goes to rent and heating. I kind of cut corners wherever I can. I eat cheaply. I don't go out. I'm always thinking about like making rent, but I mean, I know I'm certainly not alone. I know that everyone else is kind of struggling just as hard as I am.
Our pitch is to research and develop policies that would require landlords to weatherize their units or reduce energy costs in other ways for their tenants, such as installing heat pumps and solar panels. The policies we'll develop will include state initiatives, regulations to cap tenant utility costs, and other solutions that have been effective for rental unit weatherization in other states. As part of the policy research period, we'll be partnering with Middlebury College, who will assist by examining and learning from comparable initiatives utilized in other states and around the world. The purpose of our policy is twofold. to lower greenhouse gas emissions from Vermont residences through weatherization and to reduce the financial burden of utility bills for tenants. Vermonters are unable to utilize current weatherization initiatives as they don't own their own homes and are already suffering from the brutal and unchecked rental industry. Thank you for your consideration. Together, we can work towards our collective climate goals and create an equitable climate solution.
Almost forgot to unmute. Great. I think that's a great video to just kick off this conversation. And now I'll turn it to our panelist, Tom Proctor, who you just saw in that video from Rights and Democracy. Tom, if you could just introduce yourself and then talk a bit about where the effort with EAN is at and potentially if there are ways that folks on this call can get involved. And then happy to hear a little bit more about the work that Rights and Democracy is doing more broadly to address this issue. So, Tom.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Becca. I appreciate the showing the video, and it does look quite warm in that video as well, which is it's made me pine for the summer. Yeah, so for those who don't know me, my name is Tom Proctor. I am the Housing Justice Organizer for Rights and Democracy. We have been we developed this pitch for EAN over the last about 6 months or so. As part of my work as Housing Justice Organizer, I was part of the EAN's Weatherization at Scale working group. As part of that working group, I was really encouraged to see all these different organizations get together and come to real world solutions on how to effectively weatherize as many houses in Vermont as possible in order to reduce climate emissions from houses. I was especially encouraged by the fact that a lot of the work they were doing was aimed at lower and middle income families. But the more I was involved in that work group, the more I realized that there was a real missing piece in the whole part. And that was that most lower income folks are renters. They account for about 33%-ish of Vermont residents. On average, renters make about $13.90 an hour. And the biggest issue when it comes to weatherization with renters is the fact that they don't own their own homes, as I kind of laid that out in the video. And so most of the people who will be seeing the benefits of this Weatherization at Scale initiative would not be the renters who are paying for utility bills and who are living in very drafty apartments and don't really have any way to kind of fix that. So we brought this to Kara Robachek, who was absolutely phenomenal. She was so gracious and open about potentially including tenants into the Weatherization at Scale pitch. And it was quite late in the State House session at that point. And so she suggested that we create our own pitch for a specific tenant weatherization policy. So over the summer, we spoke to a lot of tenants. We learned a lot more about what the issues were. I'm a tenant myself, so I know full well what a few of these issues are. But it really kind of highlighted in that research period while we're doing the pitch how bad this is. And it isn't just about winter weatherization. That's the first thing that comes to mind when we think about Vermont. It's really also summer weatherization as well. As climate change really kicks in, it's getting hotter and more humid in Vermont. And that means houses that don't have good ventilation, houses that don't have climate control, they also, tenants in those situations suffer as well. And as you heard on the video, a lot of people end up losing food, end up getting mold in their house, end up living in fairly inhospitable conditions. So we obviously created this pitch, and we partnered with Middlebury College, and we have started doing some really great work on creating ideas around what kind of policies we would want to create and push in the State House. Right now, we're looking at creating a policy that has carrots as well as sticks. I think that's really important to note. At the end of the day, a lot of the landlords around Vermont do want to improve their housing stock. At the end of the day, it is going to mean that housing is more valuable. They're also protecting their assets. It's no good if you've got a house that's always drafty or always cold or always leaky. That's going to effectively degrade the investment that you've put in. So there's landlords do want to kind of be involved with this weatherization, but some landlords don't. Some landlords are neglectful, and especially with the housing market that we have at the moment, the fact that we've only got a 2.4% vacancy rate in Vermont means that landlords don't really have to upgrade anything right now because they'll always be able to find another tenant. So we want to make a policy that has these carrots that reward the landlords that want to early adopt weatherization efforts, but also a stick to make sure that compliance happens across the housing market. And so we've been developing these policies with Middlebury. They just got their final report out this week, and it's phenomenal. I will happily share it with anyone that wants to read 35 pages of tenant weatherization policies. But we are really pleased with what they've created. And I think in the next 6 months, what we'll be doing is gathering coalition partners, people that want to be involved in this policy more, and work with the likes of Energy Efficiency Vermont. We've already talked to folks like the Vermont Housing Finance Agency, and also the Weatherization at Scale folks to create some of these incentives, and then also develop the policies for the 2024 session that would require landlords to weatherize or pay a portion or all of tenant utility bills. So yeah, this is quite a long project. We're looking at 2 years minimum at the moment. And there's also a lot of things that need to happen in order for this to be able to work. So it's not, as anyone that works in housing knows, is the housing crisis right now is multifaceted, and no one policy is going to fix everything. If we just put in a policy tomorrow to say that landlords are required to pay utility bills, it would effectively be a useless policy because there's no way to actually enforce that. We don't know which houses around Vermont are actually rented out, which ones are owned by landlords. We don't have any kind of centralized database. So in order for this to work, we need something like a rental registry. As well as a rental registry, you also need tenant protections. It's no good requiring landlords to weatherize their apartments and then evicting their tenants the moment that they've done those weatherization efforts. So we also need things like tenant protection, things like just cause eviction. So I'm going to take my little EAN hat off right now and kind of evangelize about those kind of efforts, because we need to get these foundational policies in place in order for things like tenant weatherization to work. So at Rights and Democracy, aside from EAN, we are working on a Housing for All platform right now, which is again a 2-year platform. And in the first year, we're pushing just cause eviction in multi-municipalities around the state. So at the moment, we passed it in Burlington in 2021. We just got it on the ballot in Winooski, or we hope to. We just got the right amount of signatures in. We have got it in front of the select board in Hartford, and they are considering to put it into their charter change in 2023. And we have got it onto the ballot in Essex as well. We're hopefully also going to get it onto the ballot in Brattleboro, but that's a little bit TBD at the moment. So we're trying to create these tenant protection policies in those areas. And at the same time, we'll be pushing for a revival of S79, which, or the rental registry portion of S79 in the State House next year. And we're partnering with Vermont Interfaith Action and Vermont Legal Aid on that area. And it's really important that these things get through in the next year, so then we can build on this, so we can create an actual robust tenant weatherization policy, because we need to have that central database, and we need to make sure we've got tenant protections as well. So if any of this sounds interesting or you want to get involved in it, I'm going to pop my email in the chat. I would love to talk to you. As I said, when the weatherization portion of things, we are looking for co-chairs right now, allies that will help shape this over the next 2 years. Next 6 months, we'll be gathering those allies. And then from about June, the end of the State House session onwards, we'll be starting to develop those incentives, hopefully with the likes of Energy Efficiency Vermont and also the Weatherization at Scale folks. And we're starting to develop that policy that we'll be pushing in 2024 that would require landlords to weatherize or start having to pay utility bills themselves. I think that covered everything, Becca, but please let me know if I missed anything.
No, that was great. Great information, and it seems like a really incredible effort underway. And I think folks on this call will probably want to be engaged. So thank you for that. And now I'll turn it over to Paul Zabriskie from Capstone Community Action. Paul, you and your team are really doing on the ground work to make sure to improve and weatherize multifamily housing across the state. So if you wouldn't mind coming on, introducing yourself, talking a little bit more about that work and some of the challenges that you're seeing on the ground. So welcome, Paul.
Sure. Good afternoon, folks. My name is Paul Zabriskie, Capstone Community Action. Actually, today I'm wearing a slightly different hat. I'm talking about a program called 3E Thermal, and that's the division of Capstone and the weatherization organizations that really is focused on multifamily housing and working with landlords. 3E Thermal, we offer carrots, following up on Tom's points. We provide direct assistance through the Weatherization Assistance Program for a base level of weatherization and income eligible units. And then we work with landlords to go beyond those base levels, incentivizing them to do upgrades that provide additional energy savings. And we do that using grants and contracts with Efficiency Vermont and the Vermont Low Income Trust for Electricity and other organizations that are focused on energy upgrades and quality of life upgrades for renters. You know, the topic in the header was on the split incentive and the challenge of getting landlords to invest in their properties when they may not see the direct benefit in energy savings because tenants are paying for heat. And that's certainly a challenge that we have to confront with every landlord we speak to. First of all, most of the people yourselves who talking to your friends, your neighbors, people in your community, communicating that there are programs and incentives out there that can help landlords fix buildings. That's how we get the folks who want to do work. So please talk it up. You're an important part of this puzzle. Generally speaking, landlords, the last thing they want to do is engage their tenants. And many tenants, the last thing they want to do is engage their landlord. There is, you know, there's sort of, some tenants are a squeaky wheel, other tenants are really, really, really reluctant to be a squeaky wheel. But it makes for a difficult dynamic to even get a project started because these are jobs that require significant amount of time from all parties. They require investment. Sometimes they require financing. They require a lot of coordination. There's inconvenience for everybody. So it's a challenging thing to pull off a comprehensive job, but the value that's created for everybody at the end is more than worth it. Generally speaking, with landlords who don't pay the heat, there's a couple of points we try and point out right off the bat. One is for apartments that are listed as utilities included, they tend to get more inquiries and they tend to get better inquiries. So while many landlords intuitively feel that the tenant needs to pay for the heat because they need an incentive to conserve, many of the very savvy property owners recognize that actually you can do better if you have a decent building by including the utilities in the rent. You end up with a more stable situation, and that's really what a landlord wants. A landlord wants a happy tenant that wants to stay, and you know, the more that they can configure their property to create that scenario, the happier everybody is. We focus a lot on building durability, that when the heating system, let's say hot water heaters, if you have a lot of hot water heaters, each tenant has their own hot water heater, you end up with lots of hot water heaters, lots of systems in a building, where if you consolidate them into one system, there's a lot less maintenance for the landlord. The building is going to end up being cheaper overall to operate. There's a concern when tenants are paying for the heat that they tend to scrimp and minimize as much as possible, which is entirely logical. They're often struggling to just make ends meet. But from a landlord's perspective, that puts the landlord at risk of all kinds of issues, from moisture, mold, to damaged pipes. So there's an incentive for the landlord to take control of that piece of it, provide a well-heated and efficient apartment, and be in control of the durability of the building in the long term. And I think that just a last point that I think landlords gravitate to is when you make these upgrades, you improve the value of the building. And so landlords who are looking at their overall portfolio can see an opportunity to invest in a property. It becomes more valuable to them. It enhances their balance sheet, and it improves their ability to go out and finance other projects. So generally speaking, there's a ton of benefits for landlords beyond simply the energy savings. We're really built to make sure that those energy savings accrue primarily to the tenants. And there's a number of challenges to make that happen, but I don't think I'll dig into that at the moment. Actually, with that, I'll probably pause and field questions as we go forward.
Thanks, Paul. I feel like you bring such an important perspective, and a lot of those benefits that you mentioned, I wasn't even thinking of. So, and I've been engaged in this for a bit. So that's great to hear. And thanks for sharing. And I'll turn it over to Geoff Wilcox now from the Office of Economic Opportunity. Geoff, I'll go through your slides since I see you a few, but if you wouldn't mind, again, introducing yourself, the work that you do, and some of the current programs available now for multifamily property owners to weatherize their units, and then any other insights that you want to share. So I'll
Sure.
go to your slides now.
Okay. So hello, my name is Geoff Wilcox. I'm the Weatherization Program Director for the State Weatherization Office. I work with Paul. He's part of one of our 6 local weatherization providers. We administer the statewide low-income weatherization program. We have various funding sources, but our population we serve are folks at or under 200% of the federal poverty limit, or 80% of the state median income. And we provide weatherization services for free to low-income households, whether they rent or own their building. Since this is a rental discussion, I'll keep to that side of it. A little background: every year we weatherize about 1,000 units or 1,000 households, and that number is increasing every year. And approximately 40% of those households are renters, whether they're in a 1-unit rental or a 50-unit rental. So we do a lot of rentals every year. And services are available statewide, and hopefully the takeaway from this, you'll have our contacts and can share that statewide, because we want to serve as many folks in rentals as we can. So that's my contact info. I'll type it into the chat as well for anybody to follow up on me on anything related to weatherization and rentals. So I think, so I'm the Weatherization Director. I think I said that. These are our 6 local providers, and Paul, as you mentioned, works for Capstone, who is the houses 3E Thermal, and 3E Thermal is our statewide weatherization provider. So they receive weatherization funds directly from our office, as well as the other 5 to serve low-income folks and provide no-cost weatherization. And whether you're a rental or an owner, we typically provide 25 to 35% energy savings for our clients post weatherization, which is significant. Saves energy, puts money back in their pocket, as well as reduces emissions. So I think the next slide. Yeah, and this is just the geographical breakdown and contact info of the 5 agencies, and again, 3E Thermal is part of that. Is part of Capstone, and if you call that number, I believe you'll get a hold of them too. So yeah, some important items about multifamily weatherization, and I think I wrote some notes here that might be a little more clear. So the thing I want to relay is the benefits of weatherization, multifamily or rental weatherization, definitely accrue to both the clients and the landlord. Like Paul mentioned, our program is designed to benefit the tenant, the low-income household, But the facts are the landlord, whether they're paying the utilities or their tenants are paying the utilities benefits significantly from weatherization. If the clients obviously are going to live in a warmer, more comfortable building or unit. They'll be warmer in the winter, cooler in the summer. It's a known fact that weatherization results in a healthier household to live in. Bathroom ventilation, indoor air quality is addressed through our program, whether you're a renter or an owner-occupied building. Clients are more able to pay their rent if they're paying the utilities, and we reduce that their utilities. And landlords, whether they pay the rent or not, the split incentive, a properly weatherized building is more durable, resistant to mold, mildew, and rot. It provides a safer, healthier place for clients or tenants to live. And that leads, my experience leads to a happier tenant who's more apt to pay the rent and less apt to move out. And I think landlords really don't like it when people are moving in and out, because it creates vacancies and less income. And like Paul mentioned, you mentioned the mildew and rot stuff. It increases the value to a building significantly. We're going in there and insulating uninsulated or poorly insulated surfaces, reducing the air leakage rate of the building, ensuring that heating systems and combustion appliances are running safely. One caveat to mention with the difference between owner-occupied weatherization and rental weatherization, the landlord is required to take care of combustion appliance issues and health and safety issues. But the important thing to remember is we don't require any of those health and safety or combustion appliance issues that state law doesn't require when a building owner rents their building. So for legitimate landlords, weatherization, low-income weatherization is a no-brainer, and we have funding available for as many multifamily projects as that come to us. Weatherization is a win-win for clients and landlords, no matter who pays the utilities. So I think that's all I really wanted to say, and happy to answer questions too.
Great, thank you, Geoff, and thank you to all of our panelists. I think now we can turn it over to questions, and I can stop sharing my screen so we can see all of everyone's faces. I've not gotten a chance to catch up on the chat, but I will be monitoring the chat and facilitating the Q&A. So let me just look at those. All right, let's get started. We have a question here from Ann Lawless. Is there progress developing a landlord registry? And I think this might be towards Tom.
Yeah, and that's a great question. As anyone that's been watching the State House in the last few years, you've seen the rental registry come up again and again and again and again and again. It gets shot down. This year, we are really hoping that is not going to be the case, and we're actually really excited about putting this forward. As probably a lot of you saw in November, we managed to secure a supermajority in the House and the Senate. And that means that we've got a lot of opportunities right now to push some of these bills that have failed in the past. And one of these is the rental registry. We've been speaking with Alison Clarkson, who has been working with ourselves, and Debbie Ingram from Vermont Interfaith Action. And we're putting this forward again in the next session. So I do believe that the rental registry that was outlined in S79 last year is going to be reintroduced. I think it's going to be reintroduced as part of a larger housing bill that's getting pushed by Keisha Ram in the Senate. But we're really looking forward to seeing how this shapes up. I think in this bill as well, we're hoping that there will be carve-outs for organizations like Energy Efficiency Vermont, like Housing Finance Agency, to have access to that data as well, which is not the case of what that would have looked like last year had it gone through. And I think that's a really crucial part of this, that we do get these organizations able to access that data, so we can start working together to get a better picture of what's going on in the rental industry in Vermont, and not just on the housing side of things, but also on things like energy efficiency and climate change, and who knows what else. I'm sure I'm not thinking of 1,000 ways that we can slice and dice this data to get a better, clearer picture of what's going on in Vermont housing in general. So yeah, we are hoping that is going to go through, and I think this housing bill will probably be available come January once the State House session gets up and running.
Great, thank you, Tom. We have another question from Bob Farnham. Is the labor force available to do the work Paul is talking about? Can our technical colleges do the training quickly? Maybe Paul has an answer, or anybody else? Feel free to jump in.
Well, I wish I had an answer. No, there's definitely a challenge in all of the clean energy opportunities that we're pursuing. Weatherization is a particularly challenging physical job. And yes, we're struggling to recruit people to the field and get the work done as quickly as we would like to. I think that I think everybody has a role to play in this, quite honestly, whether it's electricians, solar installers, heat pump installers, or weatherization renovators, new housing constructors that are well versed in building science. All of these areas need additional talent. And there's a number of great, Geoff can speak to the potential for a training center. Maybe I'll tee that up for you, Geoff.
Geoff, I think you're muted. You accidentally might have muted again.
Okay, sure. Can you hear me now? Sorry. So yes, our state office received a $2 million grant from the Department of Energy for the design and implementation of a training center, and we're being really inclusive of all parties in Vermont related to all aspects of it to make sure we design and produce the training center that's going to serve Vermont the best, not just low income, but all incomes and aspects of weatherization. So it's just in the starting stages, but we'll get there.
Great, thank you.
Yep.
Another question from Marcy asks, what if a landlord pays for heat? And I think you guys alluded to some of the other benefits aside from, reduction in heating costs, but if anyone wants to expand on that.
So in I'll just be real quick. In low income weatherization, we'll still weatherize the building if the landlord pays the heat. They're longer tenant protections, but the client still benefits because again, their home is warmer, more comfortable, winter, summer, spring, and fall, more healthier, and hopefully happier. And tenant landlord relations, I think, would be better in a well weatherized unit than in one that's very cold in the winter and very hot in the summer.
I think you kind of nailed that, Geoff. Just from our perspective, from the tenant weatherization piece, if the landlord's paying for the heat, we are happy. That's an ideal situation for a tenant. They're not the ones that are going to be hit by the energy costs, and you remove that split incentive because it will behoove the landlord to properly weatherize the apartment, so they will start seeing savings as well. So yeah, we heartily encourage landlords paying for heat.
Great. We have a question from Geoff Ford. It's a long one, so bear with me as I read it. A best practice policy for multifamily dwellings was to prohibit master metered utilities. The thought being was that tenants should have an incentive to save energy. The thinking on this has changed, I believe. Do we now believe it is better for landlords to pay utilities and therefore have more incentive to weatherize and buy high efficiency equipment and appliances? You might have just answered that a tiny bit in the, yes, we encourage landlords to pay for utilities, but anyway.
Yeah, I would just, I won't speak to what people believe, but what I have seen is evidence of landlords that are paying for the heat tend to be much more progressive about investing in their building, investing in balanced heat recovery ventilation to improve air quality, which is typically those systems tend to want to be a large trunk serving lots of units. So there's a lot of benefits. I spoke to many of them already. It is possible. There are arrangements I've seen where people have BTU meters on water pipes. So if you have hydronic heat, where hot water flowing to apartments, you can actually meter how much heat is being delivered to that apartment, and that the arrangement the landlord has is they pay for utilities up to some base, and it preserves that incentive to not be wasteful, but it does allow for some stabilization if the tenant can manage it.
Great, thank you. We have a question. I think this might be in relation, well, actually, I'll just read it. What are the eligibility requirements beyond income? Does a house need to be evaluated and fail some energy usage index to be qualified for weatherization work and funding?
I was just typing I didn't realize you were, sorry. But I can take a stab and Paul can fill in more on weatherization, but the answer is no. Weatherization entails an energy audit where we determine, what the cost-effective energy savings is. Our program has to do cost-effective energy improvement work, which is no problem whatsoever. There is hardly any buildings that we go to that we can't find that type of work, and that type of work is very results in a lot of energy savings. So health and safety work obviously has no cost effectiveness. We repair, and obviously the landlord would pay for this anyway, whether we're there or not. But energy savings has to be cost effective for our program. But as I'm repeating myself, that is not a problem and results in a lot of good energy saving work.
Yeah, I'd expand on that. So we operate the weatherization program. So Geoff just spoke to the boundaries there. With 3E Thermal, it's a little different in that we're providing incentives to landlords. So here we function like their engineers, where we do the math, right? We model the building and we help them understand that this, $18,000 investment in heat recovery ventilation will pay itself back over 4.5 years, or whatever the upgrade is. We help people do windows. Generally speaking, weatherization doesn't touch windows, but there are situations where windows could be an energy saving measure and may very well be an important comfort measure. So we can model that for a landlord and provide them with the math that explains how their investment, and often it includes their financing and relatively complex projects, will add up to an overall positive cash flow and a much more valuable building to them.
Great, thank you. We have a lot of energy committee members and other volunteers on this call. So I wanted to ask all three of you, what can community volunteers do to support renters in their community in accessing weatherization services?
Tell them that there's services available. And 3E Thermal, weatherization, if you Google either of those in Vermont, you're going to come up with us in the top 3 options. And whether it's landlords or tenants, there's a ton of resources that were made available by the infrastructure bill, by the Inflation Reduction Act, that there, we have resources that we've all been paying for all along. The Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, a carbon trading scheme that we all participate in when we pay our electric bills, helps fund 3E Thermal. B on heating fuels is what helps pay for weatherization. So folks are already paying for this. They might as well take care of the services. And by and large, the most effective way, the best customers for 3E Thermal come from referrals from people in the community, talking to friends who own buildings, saying, there's opportunities here, and starting that conversation over a kitchen table or a beer.
Great. Geoff or Tom, anything else you want to add to that?
I think for me, in terms of how tenants can access weatherization, I think Paul's kind of already hit the nail on the head. I think the graphic that was sent out earlier with CVOEO on there and Capstone and the others, I think having tenants reach out to those services, you'll be able to find all the information that you need. For me, I don't think Geoff and Paul are on the politics side of things. I'm very much an activist. I'm a campaigner. I'm about trying to get policies through that will benefit tenants. If that is something that if you know tenants or you're a tenant yourself and you want to start pushing for these policies, the best thing to do is help us out with the campaigns. And one, please contact me, Tom P @radvt.org. We always looking for people who are willing to testify, especially in a committee. One thing that there is a large knowledge gap in the State House when it comes to tenant issues. And a large part of this is because we've got a part-time state legislature, which really means only middle class or independently wealthy folks can actually run for office. It costs an absolute fortune to run, and people who are making minimum wage, people who tend to rent, can't run for office. And so most people in the State House are independently wealthy, retired, or landlords themselves. And so we're always looking for tenants to come forward and tell their stories in the State House, because it makes an enormous difference. These State House officials are human. They do listen. It's just a lot of the times they just don't know what the actual current situation is when it comes to housing, especially for lower income folks. So if you want to help out trying to push some of these larger policies, please get in touch, and I will plug you into whatever campaign we've got going.
I will add to that, while I'll take off my Capstone hat and just speak as Paul from the Middlesex Energy Committee. VECAN does a great job of sending out alerts when critical bills are at a critical point. And there's often a call to action that says, this is the time to call your legislator. Make those calls. They're incredibly important. They do move people. The folks who are most vulnerable are not in a position to just pick up the phone and make a phone call. They're not monitoring these media. It's very hard to get communications from the most affected community. On the flip side, I think that folks who have resources, in particular those who are really leery of regulating rental stock, are in communication. They are traveling in those circles. So it's an uphill battle, and the most important thing the grassroots can do is, when you see that appeal that says this is the time to get on the phone, make the call.
Yeah, I just want to echo exactly what Paul just said. There is a lot of low barrier actions you can take. Making a call, even just sending an email. At Rights and Democracy, try to do our best to make this as easy as possible for folks. We have things like click to action campaigns, where you click 3 times, you put in your name and your address, and it will email every state senator that represents you, every representative that represents you, with a form email. When we put out the call to do that, please do so, because a shockingly few amount of emails to a state representative will push them in the right direction. Oftentimes they are not voting the way that we would like them to vote, or not listening to the people that we would like them to listen to, because they don't feel that their constituency actually cares or wants these things to happen. But if you prove otherwise, if you get on the phone to them, if you get in their inbox, they do change their mind. And so, yeah, thank you, Paul, for highlighting that. That is exactly what you should be doing, if nothing else.
Yeah, and I can add, in weatherization in general, our program is ramping up and will continue for many years. Right now, there is a bit of a wait list, but still I urge, if you can put up flyers in your town for weatherization in general. We have the funding, but specifically, this is a multifamily or rental topic. I think I just want to relay the point that our program, low income weatherization, exists currently, and we have the capacity to do a lot of multifamily weatherization statewide. And importantly, for landlords, if there's any way you can relay to any landlord, if you hear them say, "Oh, I can't do that," it's, you know, for one reason or the other, for legitimate, rational, common sense landlords, it is nothing but a win-win opportunity for them. We don't require anything other than some paperwork that, you know, well, they're getting a lot of services for no cost. We have paperwork to prove eligibility, but we don't require anything on their part that they are not required by the state of Vermont anyway. So just knowing that our program exists and we have the capacity and will continue even more to serve rentals. Oh, and one thing, for landlord or for renters that are having issues with landlords, Vermont Legal Aid is a good resource for help with that. Probably if you all know that, but.
Yeah, great, thank you. We have a question, I don't know if we have an answer, but how could or will the Inflation Reduction Act impact multifamily energy efficiency and weatherization funding? Does anybody
All right,
know?
can you repeat that? I was looking at that last question from Gabriel. I was gonna.
Oh,
Sorry.
no worries. The question was just how or could or will the Inflation Reduction Act impact multifamily energy efficiency or weatherization funding?
It's not going to impact it negatively. We're going to weatherize.
There's going to be tax incentives for property owners, and they'll be both in the commercial side as well as the residential side. And typically, multifamily structures, non-domicile ownership is a commercial tax credit. So they'll be there. I saw yesterday on a briefing approximately $8,000 per household is available overall for clean energy technologies and energy efficiency upgrades through the Inflation Reduction Act and the infrastructure bill, between the two of them.
Great. We have another question about the landlord registry. Would the landlord registry Tom mentioned include a local inventory of rental properties? This would be helpful for planning and land use purposes.
Sorry, could you just say that question again? I just want to make sure I'm clear on this.
Yes, it said, would the landlord registry Tom mentioned include a local inventory of rental properties? This would be helpful for planning and land use purposes.
Yes, it would. And in fact, it would actually have statewide inventory on rental properties. At the moment, the issue is where or who will be able to have access to that data. So yeah, it would be incredibly useful for planning and land use purposes. It's something that I would love to get shared with things like select boards and city councils, and also organizations like Energy Efficiency Vermont, obviously Rights and Democracy, but probably we wouldn't get hold of it because there is issues with privacy. So we are trying to push for it to be as open as possible, as have many people have access to it as possible. But one of the big things we're going to be coming up against is that privacy issue. So it would have an inventory of local rental properties. Whether or not planning and land use departments will have access to it, I don't know, but we'll be pushing for those kind of folks to be able to have access to it if it was to go through.
Great, thank you. We have another question on how do you do outreach to landlords and tenants?
So 3E Thermal, we reach out, we talk to the real estate industry because they're pretty well connected to new investment in multifamily. We work with, there are a number of renter or landlord organizations throughout the state. They meet infrequently and seemingly randomly, but we do mailings. We participate in sort of all the blast communications that come through Efficiency Vermont. And, but as I said earlier, the most valuable ones are referrals. Those are the ones that people respond to with a really open mind about what's on the other end. And I think people are just more skeptical of media.
Geoff, anything else on either one?
Yeah, so word of mouth is how we get a lot of the multifamily referrals for the 5 local agencies, and they're moving away toward from the multis. Those, some may still do them, but 3E Thermal is really what we're considering our statewide low-income multifamily provider. And a lot of our units now are nonprofit, and we're really hoping to, in the future, do some more advertising and getting private landlords into our program. We've been doing some statewide outreach or marketing for weatherization workers. And while I'm here, I might as well give that pitch. You know, the local agencies are in a ramp up, and we need workers, crew workers. It's a good paying job, and it's definitely a career ladder in weatherization. But you know, multifamily is something we'll be doing more and more of each year, and we're trying to get into the profit or the private owner side more than we have been.
Yeah, I just want to add to that. I think the getting messages out to landlords is a little bit easier. There is a few already pretty well established routes to go through. You've got you know, the landlords association, you've got housing associations as well, and so there is a little bit more of a tried and trusted method to be able to speak to landlords. I think with tenants it's a really big issue, and I think, as Paul kind of noted before, most tenants are working hand to mouth. Most tenants are working more than one job. Most tenants are not politically involved. They just do not have the time to be politically involved. They're usually, they've got kids, they've got a life, and they're usually doing far too much to ever even consider what's going on in the state house and keeping tabs on that kind of thing. So getting in touch with tenants is a really laborious but really important process. We regularly send out surveys for people to fill in. So we'll send out on our social media, so Twitter and Instagram. We have a fairly large database of folks across Vermont that we'll send emails to. But really, we're only capturing a very, very small segments every single time. So when it comes to tenant outreach, what we try and do is collaborate with a lot of organizations that also work with a lot of tenants and try and get through the networks that way to try and get to as many people as possible. But frankly, there is no easy way to get in touch with tenants. I wish there was a better way. And if anyone has any suggestions on this, other than just calling through or getting folks to try and fill in surveys, please let me know, because it is now impossible.
Great. I think we have one more question for our panelists. Geoff, can you speak a little bit more on the training center? Will it include other energy sector training or just thermal related?
Nope, it will include other energy training sectors. Like I said, it'll not just be for low income folks or low income program, but also, you know, the home performance private side, you know, Efficiency Vermont, incentivized work. That said, you know, it is a grant to our program, and you know, a key part of it will be to train our weatherization network statewide as we ramp up. But definitely there'll be training, and that's why we're taking our time to design and plan it and be inclusive, so that there'll be, you know, other type trainings, heat pumps, solar, etc. I mean, it remains to be seen exactly how it rolls out, but our intention is to be a training center of value to the whole state and all aspects of energy.
Great, thank you.
I'll just add that one of the things weatherization does is our process puts both a behavioral specialist in the building, a coach, to talk with households about their relationship to energy, their current energy uses, as well as building professionals, energy auditors. That fixed investment produces a huge amount of base knowledge about a building. And we're working very hard to make sure that beneficial electrician, the challenges of, do you have enough amperage in your panel to make the transition to heat pumps, to heat pump hot water heaters, to induction cooktops, to car chargers. Those types of upgrades, that's where we're headed societally, and it's going to be a heavier lift for people with the least resources to invest in their buildings. So we have to be really comprehensive about how we think about energy in the home. And not only is it producing savings and making housing more affordable, but also helping people with that transition to clean carbon-free fuels.
Great. I also see Ann Lawless on the call, and I know Heat Squad is doing a lot of this work. So Ann, I'm welcome to hear anything you have to add. I feel like you've been very active in the chat and just want to give you an option to share if you want. No pressure, you don't have to, but I know Heat Squad does a lot of this work. So.
Well, thank you very much, Becca. What a nice opportunity. We don't do much with complex buildings because of the modeling software we use in our home energy audits. So it's always it's a question that needs to be approached on an individual basis if we have a request from a landlord or a tenant in a multi-unit building. But what Heat Squad basically does, for starters, I'll just say we're a program that operates out of NeighborWorks of Western Vermont, which is an affordable housing agency. The Heat Squad program started in 2010, and we have since expanded into, I think it's 7 counties. We have 3 home energy auditors. One focuses on Bennington County, which is high. That's as well as in the Northeast Kingdom. Those 4 areas have high energy burden. We have lower incomes, and most people are spending a higher percentage of their income on their energy needs. So we have 3 auditors altogether, and one's based in Addison County and one's based in the Northeast Kingdom. So you can sign up for a home energy audit. It's very affordable. It's $150, and if you income qualify, which is this is really great. The income guidelines go down substantially. It's surprising how affordable it is. It's based on the number of people that live in your household. So the energy auditor comes to your home, spends about 3 hours there. It's much more than just a walkthrough. It's very intensive, and the result of a couple of hours of visit using really great tools like the blower door, testing your level of air infiltration, and we have cameras that capture infrared, so it's easy to see where cold air is escaping, where all that warm air that you paid to heat is going out. And then after the audit, in a day or so, the homeowner receives a written report that prioritizes the work that could be done, and then we do some hand holding as well, because it can be pretty overwhelming to look at a big list of needs. We don't do the weatherization work ourselves. We can kind of remain as an independent third party, but we help our audit customers navigate through that experience of finding the weatherization contractors. And then when the work is done, if the customer goes forward with a weatherization project, which is, that's the real goal, not just to do an audit, we help the customer access all the rebates that they would be eligible for. And as you all know, there's an overwhelming array of different incentives and opportunities out there. It can be a bit much to navigate your way through it. So thank you.
Yeah, it's great. And I mean, yeah, there's obviously a lot of resources available, not for just the multifamily sector as well, but individuals as well. Okay, we have one more question, and then I'm just going to turn it over to our panelists to kind of give any final thoughts. And I think if there's not more questions coming in, we can wrap up early and enjoy the rest of this snowy Friday. But are there any thoughts about a funding model to split the savings from weatherization between the landlord and the tenant? Interesting idea.
So I think when it comes to tenants investing in the property that they live in, there's not a lot of, let's say, enthusiasm on side of tenants that I've talked to in this kind of scenario. At the end of the day, they don't own their own home. They're not seeing any kind of investment, or they're not going to see the benefits of this really on a long-term basis, because there's a chance that they won't be able to live there next year. Evictions are going up across the board. There is rents are going up across the board. Housing is becoming increasingly more insecure in Vermont, especially for renters. So there's a large reluctance for tenants to put money into a property that they have absolutely got no guarantee they'll be there within the next year. So this is certainly something that we have looked at in other states, where there is kind of opportunities for tenants to pay for that weatherization, even with a kind of split cost with landlords. So I just can't see it working in Vermont.
I would add that there's on the electric side, there's a number of opportunities to engage with net metering on community solar projects where tenants can engage and take those benefits with them if they move within a utility. The ACRE program coming out of Vermont Electric and Washington Electric looks like it's moving forward, which is also a solar array, which is where the benefits of that solar investment are due to accrue to income qualified Vermonters. So there's some opportunities on the electric side, and I have no knowledge of a working model in the thermal upgrade side.
Great. We did have one more question, and so maybe I'll just make sure we get the very last one, and then I will turn it over to you guys to just close out. But Gabrielle asks, can you tie a limit or no cause eviction to state funding for landlords doing energy upgrades?
Yeah, so this is certainly something that we've considered in terms of the weatherization, tenant weatherization policy. That is kind of more of an option B. That is something that's happened in other states where landlords, if they get state funding to weatherize, can't raise rents for a certain period of time and can't evict for a certain period of time. So it's certainly something that we've considered and are looking at other states to maybe emulate. But that is definitely an option B. Option A is statewide just cause eviction to get rid of no cause in totality for everyone. It shouldn't just be the tenants that have upgrades that are protected from no cause eviction. It should be all tenants.
Great. Okay. Well, thank you so much to our panelists. I would love to give you guys just a minute or so. Any final thoughts you have to share before we end the call? I'll start with you, maybe Paul. If you want to go ahead, if you have anything. You on the spot.
Talk to your neighbors. I guess that's what, whether if they have an opportunity to make investments, that's great. Helping people understand that renters really need the support of people who are not renters in order to get the laws changed to move us towards a more just housing system. So I'm not here to advocate one way or the other on rental registry, but I will tell this network that they have a role to play if they have an opinion on it, and they should act on that notion if they're so inclined.
Great, thank you. Geoff, how about you?
Sure. No, I just want to thank you for letting me be part of this. It's great to hear what Tom and his group are doing to help all renters. Hopefully, our program there's a lot of myths and misconceptions out there, and part of my job is to tackle those and set that straight. So hopefully I've done that with multifamily rental weatherization through our low income program. Anyone feel free to contact me anytime. Maybe not on the weekends, but anytime with questions on weatherization, and I'm happy to help. And I left my contact info on the chat. So.
Great, thank you, Geoff. And Tom, last but not least.
Yeah, very grateful that you've given us this opportunity to speak to such wonderful people who are very engaged in their communities. As Paul has said, it's really down to you to help your fellow neighbors and advocate for these protections. We are talking about a third of Vermonters. We're talking about the most vulnerable people in Vermont, and as the housing situation gets progressively worse, it's going to mean a degradation of our communities. It's going to be more homelessness. We've already seen 125% spike in homelessness in the last year, which is an insane spike in homelessness. That's only going to get higher, and it's really down to folks that are plugged in, who are active like yourselves, to really advocate for your neighbors, be them property owners or be they renters. So yeah, keep your ear to the ground, track what's going through the State House, and please speak up in favor of some of these initiatives. We're not asking for the world. Rental registry is really just, we just want to know the data. At the moment, it's very much like a wild west in housing. At the moment, there is no oversight. We have no idea what's really going on, and if we don't have any data, we don't know how to fix what's going on, because we don't know what's happening. So yeah, please stay in touch and advocate for your neighbors. I've put my email in the chat as well. Would love to talk to anyone that wants to speak about this further. And Geoff, I will be actually certainly reaching out to you and learning a bit more about your organization, because I think you could have a really big part to play with tenant weatherization stuff. So thanks a lot for putting all this together, and hopefully we'll see some of your faces soon.
Thank you, everyone. And again, thank you to our panelists for lending your expertise and all the work that you do. So with that, I think we can wrap up. And I know the recording of this will be provided in materials afterwards. So look forward to that and enjoy your very snowy, hopefully snowy weekend. Bye, everyone.
Thanks. See ya.
Thank you.